I don't know, man. They just freak out when we play. But they listen, though. When the crowd goes quiet, that's how you know they're really hearing it. The voice is casual, almost amused, the kind of backstage small talk you'd forget in an hour. But tonight, it's the opening line of a file cabinet no one wanted opened. They say talent is a blessing. But in black music, people quietly talk about blessings with teeth. Blessings that don't just lift you up, they mark you. In hushed circles, the story goes that some legends didn't simply rise, they were chosen. Chosen by something old, something hungry. A bluesman who walked into the night and returned with a guitar that cried like a ghost. A funk architect who swore the music arrived as a whisper in the dark before his hands ever touched the keys. A guitarist haunted by visitors who showed up only after the lights went out. A billionaire icon surrounded by symbols older than churches and crosses. And a modern queen accused not by anonymous haters but by someone who once worked beside her of casting spells to guard her throne. For decades the industry smoothed it over. Just rumors, just superstition, they said. But the rumors outlived the press releases. They shifted, mutated, refused to die. And now the sealed tapes, the half-burned diaries, the buried interviews and forgotten footage are creeping back into the light. Each fragment points toward something darker than chart positions, darker than record deals, darker than death itself. Tonight isn't about awards, or hits, or nostalgia. Tonight, we're opening 7 case files that were never meant to be pulled from the shelf. 7 satanic secrets tied to some of the most powerful black music legends in history. So, before we begin, ask yourself, were these just myths or warnings we were never supposed to decode? 1. Robert Johnson, The Crossroads Pact. They say every legend starts somewhere. For Robert Johnson, that somewhere is a place so ordinary it almost feels insulting to the myth. A dirt intersection in the Mississippi Delta, swallowed by darkness, no signs, no lights, nothing special. The kind of place you drive past every day and never remember. And yet, that is where people still insist something supernatural took place almost a century ago. According to those who have kept the story alive, sometime around 1930 or 1931, on the back roads of the Delta, a young black musician disappeared from the juke joints he used to hang around, and then came back playing like a man no one recognized. Robert Johnson was born poor and nearly invisible in Hazelhurst, Mississippi. In that time and place, being a black bluesman meant the world expected nothing from you but survival and suffering. His early performances matched that expectation. People who were there said his playing was awkward, his timing off, his sound forgettable. Older musicians supposedly told him straight to his face that he couldn't carry a tune to save his life. And then, he was gone. Long enough for people to stop asking where he was, and long enough for a legend to start breathing on its own. When he came back, the change wasn't just an improvement. People called it unnatural. His fingers moved too fast. His rhythm snapped into place like he'd been playing in secret with someone no one else could see. His slide guitar didn't sound like wood and steel anymore. It sounded like something crying from another world. In the Delta, no one asked, "Where'd you learn that?" They asked, "What did you do?" According to the most famous version of the story, sometime close to midnight, Robert walked to a lonely crossroads. Some people say Highway 61, others point to a path near Dockery Plantation, and met a tall, dark figure who took his guitar, tuned it, and handed it back with a simple offer. Unbelievable talent in exchange for his soul. Robert Johnson never went on record to admit this happened, but he never firmly denied it either. And in the Deep South, where people measure truth with superstition as much as with documents, silence is gasoline on a rumor. When the music sounds like a haunting, denial doesn't matter. Between 1936 and 1937, Johnson recorded only 29 songs, just 29. But those songs came loaded with imagery that, for the time, felt dangerously blatant. Crossroad Blues, Hellhound on My Trail, Me and the Devil Blues. To outsiders, they might sound like metaphors. To the people who heard them in dim juke joints, they did not. When Johnson sang, "You may bury my body down by the highway side," it didn't play like poetry. It played like someone reading his own fate out loud. White preachers labeled it the devil's music. Black elders said it was power that could call things you didn't want in your house. Jukebox owners claimed people drank harder, fought more, and stared off like they'd seen something whenever Robert's songs spun. But the legend didn't peak when he got good. It peaked when he died. On the 16th of August 1938, Robert Johnson collapsed near Greenwood, Mississippi. He was 27. There was no official coroner's report, no autopsy, no neat medical cause preserved in ink. Just a man placed in the ground, and a story left behind like a live wire. Some witnesses said he was poisoned, handed a bottle of whiskey laced with something toxic by a jealous husband. Others claimed he didn't just drop, he suffered. They said he howled at night, crawled across the floor, clawing at the air like he was trying to escape something no one else could see. A few people insisted he kept talking about hellhounds, convinced they were finally tracking him down. It sounds theatrical. Until you remember, these weren't campfire storytellers. These were people who swore they watched him die. People who were adamant that Robert wasn't just sick, he was terrified. Years later, researchers tried to test the poisoning theory against the symptoms described. According to some accounts, what people saw didn't quite match strychnine, the poison most folks blamed. The slow torture, the dehydration. The hallucinations reportedly lined up more with naphthalene, the chemical found in mothballs, an old backwoods method believed to leave almost no clear forensic trail in the 1,930 seconds. Not confirmed, not proven, just another unsettling possibility. And then there's the detail that still chills anyone who studies his story. Robert Johnson has 3 possible graves. 3. No one can say with certainty where his body lies. 3 different churches claim him. 3 grave markers stand in 3 separate spots. The paperwork is messy, missing in some places, contradictory in others, incomplete almost everywhere. The man who walked into history through a shadow seems to have left it split into 3. Rumor or truth? Folklore or fact? In the end, the labels don't change the pattern. What matters is that almost every official record tied to Robert Johnson's life and death is cracked, smudged, or gone. It's the perfect ground for a myth to spread its roots. A myth the industry later used to sell the blues while quietly ignoring how little they ever bothered to truly document the life of a black genius they exploited. A poor young man from Mississippi, once mocked for his playing, returns with a sound people still describe as possessed. A story of a midnight bargain blows through the Delta like wildfire. A death with no clear cause and no clear grave seals the legend shut. If this was only a story, why do the real documents vanish like smoke? Why, with only 29 recorded songs, does it still feel like Robert Johnson carried something back from that crossroads that never fully left? And if Robert Johnson truly met no one that night, then who tuned his guitar? 2. Sly Stone, the funk prophet who danced with shadows. Before the collapse, before the arrests, before the lost years where people wondered if he was even still alive, Sly Stone wasn't just a star. He was the closest thing Black America had to a musical prophet. In the late 1960 seconds, nobody blended gospel fire, psychedelic swirl, street funk, and radical politics the way Sly and the Family Stone did. On the outside, it was all rainbow clothes, peace signs, and utopian slogans. But behind the posters and magazine covers, there were other stories. Stories the industry rarely repeated. Stories that suggested something else moved with Sly. Something that pushed him, fed him, and later broke him. According to people who lived inside that world, it started around 1968, right after Dance to the Music turned Sly and the Family Stone into household names. Band members noticed a small shift at first. Sly stopped liking daytime rehearsals. He pushed sessions later and later until they were starting at 2 or 3 in the morning. He began demanding that the studio lights be turned completely off. No fluorescence, no lamps, no stage glow, just candlelight. Witnesses said he arranged those candles in strange circles on the floor, patterns no one understood. At first, the band shrugged. This was Sly Stone, After all, eccentricity was part of the job description. But as the months rolled on, the strangeness grew harder to laugh off. By 1969, musicians inside the family Stone camp were whispering among themselves. Trumpeter Cynthia Robinson and saxophonist Jerry Martini would later say they heard Sly talking to someone no one else could see. They claimed he would stop mid-take, glance into a corner of the room, and murmur under his breath as if answering a question only he had heard. Sly told some people it was inspiration, the muse, the groove. Others described it differently. They called it a shadow that always seemed to arrive a step ahead of him. The record that captured this era, There's a Riot Going On, in 1971, sounded nothing like Flower Power or Peace and Love. It was heavy, claustrophobic, murky, clogged with distortion, muffled drums, and background whispers so deep the engineers supposedly couldn't isolate them. One producer said he believed Sly had slipped in reversed chants on certain tracks. Another recalled walking into Studio A and finding Sly alone, chanting over a drum machine for hours, candles flickering around him in what looked like a ritual circle. Sly brushed it off with a grin. "I'm just summoning the funk," he said. Then the symbols started appearing. During the 1972 tours, Sly began wearing oversized rings engraved with eyes, spirals, snakes, and inverted shapes that fans didn't recognize from any mainstream fashion trend. His custom stage jackets carried stitched patterns that some later compared to occult sigils. When journalists asked about them, Sly gave the same answer: "These are my protectors." Protectors from what? He never elaborated. People close to him believed the real turning point came between late 1972 and early 1973, when Sly was introduced to a loose circle of radical spiritual seekers in Los Angeles, a mix of self-described mystics, energy workers, and fringe gurus. Friends claimed he became fascinated with talk of entities, frequencies, and unseen forces. Some insisted he believed dark energies surrounded him. Others believed he was actively trying to contact them. By 1974, the rumors had become impossible to ignore. A longtime roadie for the family Stone said Sly kept a locked-back room in his Bel Air home. According to him, that room was always dark, the air inside thick with incense and a metallic tang he couldn't explain. He said the candles in that room never seemed to go out, even when Sly was on tour. Any time he passed the door, he claimed he felt a weight in his chest, like the room itself was pushing him away. No one outside the inner circle ever confirmed what was inside. When the house was raided on drug charges in 1975, official reports said nothing about a ritual space or a sealed room. What the documents did record were Sly's symptoms: crushing paranoia, sudden disappearances, violent mood swings, and the voices he told people he couldn't drown out. One close friend remembered a conversation from 1976 that never left him. Sly reportedly said, "Something came with the fame, something I didn't ask for." The friend assumed it was the drugs talking. Maybe it was. Or maybe Sly was circling back to the same mystery the rumors had built around him from the beginning. As Sly stepped away from the spotlight in the 1,980 seconds, choosing anonymity and isolation over stages and cameras, his story grew even darker in public imagination. A handful of journalists who tracked him down claimed he still refused to work in brightly lit studios. Instead, he preferred dim rooms, colored bulbs, and nights that melted into mornings. Some people who saw him during those years said he kept crystals and stones laid out around his equipment in star-shaped designs. In 1991, a backup singer claimed Sly once told her, "Music is a spell. You don't cast it alone." The industry rarely mentioned any of this. The more chaotic his personal life became, the more they dismissed the rumors as the side effects of cocaine, pressure, and fame. But the timing never stopped feeling suspicious. The midnight recording sessions, the whispered conversations with empty corners, the strange symbols, the locked room, the sudden, almost violent falling off of a genius who had once felt unstoppable. Sly Stone never sat down for an interview to confirm these stories. He never stood up to deny them either. And maybe that's why his legend feels different. Because while other artists only flirted with the idea of darkness, People say Sly stepped into it with open arms and never truly came back out. 3. Jimi Hendrix, the guitar god and the night visitor. If Robert Johnson was the whisper in the fields, Jimi Hendrix was the storm that stepped out of that same darkness and plugged straight into an amplifier. But unlike Johnson, Jimi didn't grow up on dusty crossroads and juke joints. He came out of Seattle in the 1942, a city wrapped in war tension, poverty, broken homes, and the kind of childhood chaos that leaves marks you can't see on the skin. And yet, by the mid-1960s, when he walked on stage, it felt like something beyond ordinary human skill slipped into his fingers. The question people kept asking wasn't just how he played. It was, what was playing through him? By 1966, when Jimi formed The Experience and started tearing through London's club circuit, musicians there whispered the same line over and over. He plays like he's possessed. It wasn't just flattery. Guitarists who had seen everything admitted they didn't understand what he was doing. According to one famous account, Eric Clapton himself walked off stage after hearing Jimi play, shaken and pale, reportedly muttering, "I can't compete with this." For some, it felt like the same curse people once attached to Robert Johnson, a gift so extreme it didn't feel like it belonged to a mortal. And then, the dreams began. People close to Jimi later said he often woke up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, breathing hard like he'd been running. He told them he'd seen a tall figure standing in the corner of the room, just watching. His girlfriend, Monica Danneman, later wrote that Jimi spoke repeatedly about a presence that followed him, especially after shows. Sometimes he described it as a human-shaped shadow at the edge of his vision, other times as a voice that whispered melodies before he ever played them, like the music was being delivered to him instead of created by him. And according to those accounts, the more famous he became, the louder those unseen voices seemed to get. The moment that haunted Monica most supposedly happened in late 1969 during the chaotic stretch between Woodstock and his European tours. She said Jimi confessed to her, "Sometimes I feel like I'm not alone up there. Something else is playing." She assumed he meant the drugs, the adrenaline, the pressure. Maybe that's all it was. Maybe it wasn't. During this same period, the music itself shifted into stranger territory. Take 1983, A Merman I Should Turn to Be, recorded in 1968. On the surface, it's a psychedelic epic, but to many who sifted through his lyrics, it sounded more like a man planning to abandon this world entirely. Paired with Jimi's personal sketches and journal fragments, drawings of eyes, portals, stairways to nowhere, unexplained symbols that no one recalls him ever decoding, the whole picture started to feel less like pure art and more like ritual, like he was mapping something he didn't have the words to talk about directly. Everything tightened in 1970, his final year. Friends described Jimi as increasingly jumpy and sleep-deprived, glancing over his shoulder, convinced someone or something was watching him. According to people in his circle, he kept saying, "They want something from me," but never clearly identified who they were. Hotel security staff claimed he began insisting that all windows be completely covered, even during daylight hours. No open curtains, no uncovered glass. As if he didn't just fear stalkers or cameras, but the feeling of being exposed to whatever he thought was closing in. In a July 1970 interview, when a reporter casually asked about death, Jimi replied, "I'm not afraid of it. I already know who's coming for me." The journalist laughed, treating it as rock star bravado. People who knew Jimi well said it didn't sound like a joke when he said it. Then came the 18th of September, 1970, the day the world officially lost him. The official version is simple on paper. Jimi Hendrix died after aspirating his own vomit, triggered by a barbiturate overdose. Case closed. But the details surrounding that morning have never fully settled. Paramedics who arrived at 11:27 a.m. said Jimi had no pulse by the time they reached him. Yet, despite reports of massive regurgitation, his clothes were described as being surprisingly clean. Medical staff later said they found red wine deep in his lungs, but not spilled all over the bed around him. That led to one chilling question. How does someone drown in wine without leaving obvious traces of it on the scene? Then there was Monica's timeline. At first, she said she had been with him through the night. Later, she claimed she wasn't in the room at the critical moments. At another point, she insisted he was still alive when the ambulance arrived, a statement that directly conflicted with medics who said he had likely been dead for hours. Neighbors and other residents in the building reported noises, movement, footsteps in the hallway, and the presence of people whose identities were never officially recorded. Despite these contradictions, there was no full, exhaustive police investigation, no large-scale inquiry into who had access to the room, who might have had motives, or what really happened in those missing hours. The case was effectively closed within a very short window, leaving questions hanging in the air like smoke. Years later, people in Jimmy's circle would talk more openly about the pressures he was under. They described business conflicts, management wars, financial disputes, and a contract he was reportedly desperate to escape. According to some accounts, he told multiple friends he felt trapped by forces bigger than music, that powerful people would rather see him gone than see him walk away on his own terms. Even his road manager suggested Jimmy feared he might be taken out before he could fully regain control of his art and money. But the darkest thread in the story is a detail Monica reportedly shared only once, then never repeated in depth. She claimed that on the night before he died, Jimmy turned to her and said, "It's coming back tonight." When she asked what it was, Jimmy didn't answer. He just shook his head. Maybe it was a metaphor. Maybe it was a bad feeling, a drug-fueled premonition, a hallucination, or a memory of the same presence he had described for years. No one knows. No one ever dug long enough or deep enough to find out. What remains is this: Jimi Hendrix didn't just die young. According to many who have studied his final months, he died at the moment his music felt most otherworldly, most uncontainable, most threatening to the systems around him. He joined the line of black artists whose brilliance seemed to arrive with shadows attached, shadows that grew darker and more restless the closer they got to greatness. And, like Robert Johnson before him, Jimmy left behind one question that still refuses to fade. If he didn't walk into the darkness alone, then who walked in with him? 4. Prince, the purple mystic who spoke in codes. Prince Rogers Nelson didn't move through the world like everyone else. He seemed to glide, as if he'd been briefed on a map the rest of us weren't allowed to see. But to understand the rumors that wrapped around him, you have to go back to one night, the night many people quietly say everything shifted. The 7th of June, 1984, Minneapolis. Prince premiered Purple Rain to a private crowd at First Avenue. A staffer later told a reporter it felt like the air changed in the room, like Prince wasn't entirely human that night, like something was standing just behind him. Most people wrote it off as fan worship, a bit of exaggeration around a rising star. But those who worked closest to him insisted that after 1984, something flipped. Inspiration, they said, didn't feel like it came from the world anymore. It felt like it came from somewhere else. By 1987, during the Sign o' the Times sessions, engineers described Prince's recording habits with a kind of nervous respect. According to them, he started treating sessions like rituals. He chose specific times to begin takes: 11:11 p.m., 10:07 a.m., 3:33 a.m. He reportedly called these his activation hours, moments when the energy was right. One engineer remembered Prince stopping mid-song, freezing, and staring into a shadowed corner of the studio. After a long pause, Prince whispered, "Not now." When the engineer asked what he meant, Prince just blinked, adjusted his guitar, and kept playing like nothing had happened. Then came 1993. The year he walked away from his own name. The record label spun it as a marketing stunt. Prince publicly framed it as liberation from a system he saw as a prison. But people inside Paisley Park described something stranger. In August 1993, during a late-night session, Prince was said to have walked into the studio wearing a hooded cloak embroidered with the now famous love symbol. He set a journal down on the console and told the room, "This symbol came to me last night. It wasn't a dream, it was a visitation." The crew laughed nervously, assuming he was being dramatic. Prince reportedly didn't laugh. To him, the symbol was not just a logo. It was a sigil, a key, a sign he believed had been shown, not invented. On the 14th of October 1993, he officially changed his name to the unpronounceable symbol. The world saw a rebellious genius trolling his record company. Those on the inside said he believed he was signaling to something or someone that guided him. A former assistant later claimed Prince sometimes meditated in total darkness at Paisley Park, with the symbol drawn in chalk on the floor around him. She said he called it aligning the frequencies. Whether that phrase was spiritual metaphor, creative theater, or something deeper, no one outside that room truly knows. Things spiraled into even more unsettling territory in 2006 during the 3121 era. Prince began hosting invitation-only parties at a rented mansion in Los Angeles. According to guests, the lights were low, purple haze drifted through the hallways, and intricate geometric patterns pulsed across the walls and ceilings. One attendee said the shape seemed to shift when Prince walked by, bending slightly toward him like they recognized him. Another guest claimed Prince disappeared behind a velvet curtain for about 10 minutes during one of these nights. When he returned, they said his pupils looked blown wide, his voice had dropped to a whisper, and he murmured, "They're still listening." Was he talking about the press, the industry, the government, or something no one wanted to name? No one pressed him for details. Footage from these parties reportedly exists but has never been fully released. What has leaked, blurry, partial clips, restricted projections, only fueled theories that Prince was performing more than music, that he was dabbling with occult symbolism dressed up as avant-garde art. Then came the final act. April 2016. On April 14, Prince's private jet made an emergency landing in Moline, Illinois. The official explanation, he had the flu. But paramedics said he was unresponsive and required a dose of Narcan, a medication used to counter opioid overdoses. When he regained consciousness, witnesses claimed he said, "Please don't let them take me." Most assumed he meant paparazzi, fans, or hospital staff. According to those same accounts, he repeated the sentence again, softer. Back at Paisley Park on April 16, people said Prince spent part of the night walking the grounds alone around 2 a.m., flashlight in hand, checking doors and hallways. He reportedly told someone he believed someone had been inside the compound earlier that day. Around the same time, staff noticed strange glitches in the security system. Camera feeds cut out. Hours of footage vanished or corrupted. Segments from multiple angles simply gone. No official explanation ever fully accounted for why. On April 19, Prince visited a local pharmacy 3 times in 1 week. The pharmacist later said Prince mentioned feeling watched. The comment was brushed off as stress-induced paranoia. 2 days later, on the 21st of April 2016, at 9:43 a.m., Prince was found collapsed in an elevator inside Paisley Park. The door was partially open, as though he had tried to escape or reach help. The official cause of death: accidental fentanyl overdose. File closed. But around the edges of that file, the unanswered details piled up. His laptop and personal writings were said to have disappeared from the building within 24 hours. Surveillance footage from the night before was corrupted. Several employees later claimed they saw a person dressed in black leaving the property around 8 a.m., a detail that never appeared in the final police summary. Then there were Prince's own warnings. In a 2015 interview, just a year before his death, Prince looked straight into the camera and said, "There are dark forces in this industry, bigger than you think." People chuckled when he said it on camera. No one was laughing the morning he was found on that elevator floor. Prince was not just a songwriter, not just a performer. He was a codebreaker, a man obsessed with hidden meanings, spiritual currents, and systems of power behind the curtain. And maybe that was the problem. The closer he seemed to get to whatever pattern he thought was guiding his life, the faster the shadows seemed to close around him. Prince didn't only surround himself with symbols. According to those who watched him most closely, he lived inside them. He used them as shields, messages, and keys. And when he died, the music stopped. The questions didn't. The symbols stayed behind, outliving the man who believed they had been sent to him from somewhere beyond the stage lights. 5. Beyoncé, the modern queen accused by her own shadow. People don't really fear power. They fear the moment power stops looking human. And somewhere along Beyoncé's climb, somewhere between the Grammys, the world tours, and the billion-dollar empire, her success crossed that invisible line. The line where admiration starts to warp into suspicion, and suspicion turns into something much darker, not because of what she did under the spotlights, but because of what people swore they saw in the shadows behind her. Beyoncé Giselle Knowles-Carter was never treated like an ordinary talent. From the moment Destiny's Child began dominating radio in the mid-1990 seconds, older musicians and insiders repeated the same phrase. That girl is different. Not just gifted, untouchable, but it wasn't until she stepped fully into her solo era in 2003, after Crazy in Love detonated across the world, that the first unsettling pattern emerged. Fans and critics alike started noticing the recurring visuals. Triangle hand signs held high in the air, one-eye poses in photo shoots, choreography that traced shapes people said looked like ancient symbols older than modern Christianity itself. At first it was brushed off as fashion, branding, coincidence. Then the internet grew teeth, and nothing stayed innocent for long. By 2008, when the I Am Sasha Fierce era took over, the rumors exploded. Beyoncé openly told Oprah and other interviewers that she had an alter ego who stepped in whenever she went on stage. She called this persona Sasha Fierce, stronger than me, more fearless than me, more sexual than me. To her, it was performance psychology, a way to handle stage fright, a mental costume she could put on and take off. To conspiracy circles, especially on certain black forums like Lipstick Alley, SHH, and early YouTube channels that dissected every frame, it sounded like something closer to a possession story. Clips circulated of Beyoncé switching from soft-spoken, almost shy interviews to the wild, snarling intensity of Sasha Fierce in performance. Some people called it range and professionalism. Others insisted it looked like invocation, as if she was calling something in. But the real shockwave didn't hit until the 2017 Grammys. Beyoncé opened her performance bathed in gold, wearing a headdress that clearly evoked Oshun, a revered Yoruba Orisha associated with rivers, womanhood, and divine power. The staging was slow, deliberate, and heavy with symbolism. Glowing halos, ritual-like movements, frozen tableaus that looked more like worship than pop spectacle. It wasn't satanic. It was spiritual, rooted in African tradition, layered and intentional. But online, nuance died instantly. According to countless clips and commentaries, ministers went on television calling it witchcraft. Conservative pundits labeled her a pagan priestess in carefully worded rants. The industry praised the performance as groundbreaking and beautiful. In the shadows of social media, a different narrative hardened, that Beyoncé was now working with forces beyond the church and beyond God. Still, even that was nothing compared to what happened in September 2018. That was when Beyoncé's myth collided with a courtroom file. Kimberly Thompson, a drummer who had toured and worked with Beyoncé for around 7 years, filed legal documents seeking a restraining order. In them, she accused Beyoncé of, in her words, extreme witchcraft, alleging magic spells of sexual molestation, psychic attacks, tapped phones, interference in her finances, and even the killing of her pet kitten through supernatural means. The court dismissed the case for lack of evidence. Legal experts called the claims unfounded. Many fans believed Thompson was struggling with personal issues and projecting them onto a former employer. But for people already convinced something otherworldly followed Beyoncé, the existence of that filing was gasoline on a fire. These were no longer anonymous internet rumors. They were accusations with names, dates, and signatures stamped by an actual court system, even if they ultimately went nowhere. Thompson claimed Beyoncé used dark energy to control those around her. She said she heard Beyoncé's voice in her head when Beyoncé was nowhere near. Mental health professionals pointed to possible delusion. Conspiracy theorists pointed to confirmation. Then came the footage. In 2020, old slowed-down videos of Beyoncé performing at the Super Bowl began trending again. One widely shared clip zoomed in on her face mid-performance. For a split second, her eyes widened at a strange angle, her features contorting into something almost feral. Screen captured at the wrong frame, it looked disturbing. Most viewers and professionals chalked it up to intensity, motion blur, and an unflattering freeze frame, the kind of moment any performer would beg not to see paused. But millions online dubbed it the demon face. Reaction channels did frame-by-frame breakdowns. TikTok accounts and YouTube creators claimed she had shapeshifted. According to reports, at least one preacher even used the clip in a sermon titled "The Devil Works Through Beauty," holding her image up as Exhibit A. Whether viewers believed it or not, the clip spread faster than any official explanation. The image of Beyoncé mid-contortion became another brick in a wall of suspicion. Then came Renaissance in 2022. The album was a lush, unapologetic dive into house, ballroom, and black queer tradition. Critics called it liberation, a love letter to underground cultures, a reclamation of spaces long ignored by the mainstream. Conspiracy channels saw something else. They dissected the horse imagery, the chrome bodies, the mirrored masks, the metallic halos. Artists and fashion historians talked about Afrofuturism and queer history. Online theorists talked about occult signaling and ritual staging. The more Beyoncé pushed her visuals into mythic, surreal territory, the easier it became for people to pin every esoteric tradition they'd ever heard of onto her. Yoruba spirituality, Masonic symbolism, Illuminati lore, ancient feminine cults, shadow magic, Egyptian mysticism. None of it was proven. All of it stuck. But what makes Beyoncé's case stand apart isn't the content of the rumors, it's the silence that follows them. Other artists clap back, mock the conspiracies, or address them head-on. Beyoncé never does. She doesn't speak on the witchcraft allegations. She doesn't break down her symbolism for the public. She doesn't correct the strangest theories. She lets them hang in the air, heavy, unanswered, unresolved. And in a culture starving for explanations, silence often gets mistaken for confirmation. Maybe that's why the rumors feel immortal, almost bulletproof. Maybe that's why her shadow, in some people's minds, now seems bigger than any actual scandal attached to her name. Or maybe the truth is simpler and uglier. Maybe Beyoncé's power expanded so fast, so far, so improbably beyond what people think a black woman in America is supposed to reach, that a supernatural explanation was the only way some minds could process it. Because when a black woman becomes that powerful, history shows America rarely just lets her exist. It builds a myth around her, a story designed to drag her back down to earth, even if that story has to come wrapped in demons, spells, and whispered accusations of the dark. 6. Tina Turner. The curse she chanted her way out of. Every legend has an origin. But Tina Turner's story doesn't start with stadium lights or platinum records. It starts with fear. A kind of fear so old and heavy that, even decades later, people still whisper about the shadows that lived inside the Turner household. And the darkest whisper of all claimed Tina didn't just escape a violent husband, she escaped a curse. Before the world crowned her the queen of rock and roll, Anna Mae Bullock was a young black girl in Nutbush, Tennessee, growing up in a home where faith, superstition, and terror sat at the same dinner table. Church hymns, old folk beliefs, and sudden flashes of violence were all part of the same air she breathed. But the real turning point, at least according to those who tell it, came in 1957 at Club Manhattan in St. Louis. That was the night she met Ike Turner. Ike wasn't just a band leader. People who worked with him said he was obsessed with control, emotional, physical, and, some believed, spiritual. Musicians in his orbit claimed he talked about energies, protective rituals, and symbols he believed would keep his music and his name on top. By 1960, after Tina joined the Kings of Rhythm and recorded A Fool in Love, Ike began pulling her away from everyone else. Former bandmates said he slowly cut off her access to friends and family, positioning himself as the center of her universe. According to multiple people who were around them then, Ike kept odd objects in the house items he referred to as protectors. Small bones, carved markings, candles that were lit even when no one seemed to be using the room. To outsiders, it might have looked like eccentric decor. To those living inside those walls, it felt like the air itself changed depending on Ike's mood. The darkest rumor came from a backup singer around 1963. She claimed Ike kept a locked room in the house, a room Tina was told never to enter. According to her, inside that room were candles arranged in circles, mirrors facing each other at strange angles, and a table covered with handwritten pages. A roadie later insisted Ike believed those pages contained power phrases, chants he used before major shows. Another person claimed he once saw Ike pacing in that room with the lights off, muttering, "She's mine, she'll never leave," over and over. No police file ever confirmed such a room existed, but almost every early member of the Ike and Tina camp seemed to have a story about it. Things only intensified after the two married in 1,962 inches, Tijuana, Mexico. According to Tina's own later accounts, Ike's violence escalated quickly after that. What she didn't always share publicly were the moments that didn't feel entirely normal. Tina reportedly told a close friend that during some of Ike's worst attacks, he would go blank. His eyes turned empty, his face drained, as if somebody else had stepped into his body. Whether that was trauma, substances, or something harder to name, those details fed a growing belief that Ike wasn't just hurting her, he was spiritually draining her. By 1973, Tina was breaking. She later admitted she attempted suicide that year by overdosing on sleeping pills. But in a more private conversation, she was said to have described the feeling differently. Not just depression, but a sense that she was being suffocated from the inside, that her spirit was dying faster than her body. Those words, once they leaked, became fuel for the rumor that she wasn't only trapped in a bad marriage, she was caught in some kind of unseen grip wrapped around Ike. Then, everything snapped in 1974. Before a concert in Dallas, Ike reportedly beat Tina so badly she was left bloody and dazed. That night, she fled the hotel with nothing but a small bag, her clothes torn, her face swollen, and ran barefoot across a freeway to a nearby Ramada Inn. A housekeeper later recalled seeing Tina in the hallway, sitting alone, humming something under her breath. It wasn't a church hymn, it wasn't in English. She was chanting. Days later, Tina revealed she had started repeating a Buddhist mantra, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, for the first time. She said that when she chanted it, she felt something break, like an invisible chain loosening. From 1,974 to 1,976, people around her said she chanted constantly backstage, in bus bathrooms, in hotel rooms, in corners of dressing rooms. According to band members, the atmosphere in the Turner home shifted after she began the practice. The air felt a little lighter. Ike's rage, they claimed, became more erratic, as if he could sense that whatever hold he had on her was weakening. Some people insisted Ike accused her of breaking the balance, a phrase that confused even those who had known him for years. On the 1st of July 1976, after yet another violent incident in Dallas, Tina finally made her move. She left Ike with only 36 cents and a mobile credit card, walking away from the man, the band, and the life that had nearly killed her. To the public, it became a story of survival and courage. To many in the black music community, it looked like something more a woman who had cut a spiritual cord that had been tightening around her for years. After Tina left, Ike's life unraveled. His addictions worsened, the band collapsed, the house and the so-called ritual room, if it truly existed,